If you talk to people about insulation, most people refer to fiberglass bats, and if you've ever handled it, you'll understand why it has this connotation of being terrible stuff. It's not only made of glass fibers like this, it can penetrate your skin very easily, but what a lot of people don't realise is that the old fiberglass that's been in roofs, it's not only been impregnated with dust that could have lead and asbestos in it, but almost always has had visitation by vermin. So you're talking about not only fiberglass but a lot of bacteria, and this is one of the reasons why handling fiberglass should be done very carefully. A lot of houses have penetrations not only in the ceilings but in the walls that allow whatever's in the ceiling to get into your house. This is an older house with the ceiling rose. Some people have got halogen lights like this that are cut into the ceilings that aren't airtight, and then other people have wall vents. All of these allow whatever's up in your roof to filter into your roof because they are not airtight and actually are associated with what is in your roof space. If you were to get up in the roof to see how fiberglass is removed by hand, you'd be amazed how much dust is created. In this instance here, the attempt is to bag the material, but you can imagine the amount of glass fibers that are floating in the air right now, the dust, and the bacteria that's associated with it. So taking insulation out by hand is not the safe way. Some people who use this method will tell you that what they do is spray the ceiling immediately afterwards with PVA glue. Now this dust is so airborne for such a long time, it's not captured by the glue. PVA glue dries out in about 20 minutes. You would have to literally flood the whole of the ceiling, every square centimetre, for it to work anyway. But in the meantime it's dried out, and this dust that's airborne will then settle down on a dry surface and will always be disturbable, and because it's respirable is dangerous. So Ceiling Suckers developed a safe way of removing not only fiberglass bats but all other types of insulation as well. As you can see, we got into the roof by removing a few roof tiles. Sucking out fiberglass bats, and indeed any sort of insulation, is not a one-pass operation. We suck out the fiberglass itself. You can see this roof here has had a lot of visitation with rats. There's a lot of rat droppings here. There's been rats' nests, and where rats have been nesting, they urinate and defecate and the insulation sticks to your ceiling. So once we vacuum the insulation out, we then go over the ceiling a second time with a smaller hose to suck what is literally on the ceiling itself. This method is so efficient that it really only takes one person to do the whole ceiling, sucking out the fiberglass and then the ceiling itself. You can see there's very little dust created, and in a lot of cases disposable overalls aren't even required because of that minimal amount of dust. Thick rubber gloves and a respirator of course are almost mandatory, and the unit outside that could be out on the street or in your driveway also too has high efficiency particulate air filtration system, or the HEPA system, HEPA filters. As well as fiberglass bats, this unit is designed for sucking out the very dustiest of them all, and this is urea formaldehyde foam. It was a very popular product because it was quick to install, it was cheap, but unfortunately after as little as 3 months would start to break down to just absolutely fine dust. And the formaldehyde, well, formaldehyde is a carcinogen. It's banned in a lot of products and in a lot of schools. For instance, you're not allowed to use particle board or MDF for teaching woodworking because of the formaldehyde content in it. So you can imagine the absolute filtration system you would need to work with this particular product. Sometimes the material is so impregnated into the ceiling substrate we've actually got to brush the ceiling, unlike products like cellulose fibre. Cellulose fibre was really very popular for about a 30-year period, but now there's a lot of reservations about using it in homes because of the fact that although it has fire retardants in it, it still will burn. A lot of people don't realise that these fire retardants is a combination of borax and boric acid. 20% by volume usually, and that is a toxin. And then there was another type of insulation, rock wool. This was made from basalt usually. Basalt is volcanic rock, and what they found many years ago, that if you melted something that had already been in a molten state, it takes less temperature to bring it to that molten state. They would spin it off through spinnerets, and it would be pumped into people's roofs to eventually create a problem, because it's very irritating, it's a carcinogen, and it permeates everything. Most people don't go in a roof and have a really good look at the way the roof is built, so they've got no idea just how difficult and sometimes almost downright impossible it is to clean a ceiling properly. There was no set format in the way roofs were built, and particularly since the 1950s, houses became lower and lower in roof height, so the amount of space available to do anything at all up there is very restrictive. So we've got to feed hoses, we've got to crawl around in the roof, we've got to make sure that we don't slip and put our foot through the ceilings, and we've got to also give you a clean ceiling. Sometimes we can use extensions, and other times like this, because of the distance from what is called the hanging beam, that's that vertical timber there, to the outside edge, it's so restrictive that we've actually got to crawl in there and work face to face with the ceiling itself. Not only is it confined, we've got to contend with loose wiring, sometimes dangerous wiring. We've got to work with wires that sometimes are not done legally, and we don't know that it's like that until we're actually working. Particularly around the edges of the roof where it's closer to the ceiling, we've got to contend with spiders. As you can see here, spider webs are just so profuse in this area that at the end of the day, we're not only covered with cobwebs, but we also quite often have spiders running through our hair and down our necks. These spiders won't necessarily kill you, but when they do bite, they leave these terrible itchy sores that just won't go away. Movement in a roof like this is very constrained. You're dictated to by not only the height of the roof, the purlins which are directly over my back, the hanging beams that are on either side of me here, and also the space of the timbers themselves, the ceiling joists. And then once we've sucked out the bulk of the insulation with the 150mm hose, we've got to go over the ceiling a second time, which is what's happening here, with the smaller hose to get to the nooks and crannies, right out to the very edges. When material like this has been blown in, quite often it's actually blown onto overhead timbers as well. And although we'd like to, and we do try, we can't guarantee that we can clean overhead, because to do that you've virtually got to lie on your back with the material raining on your face, and that in itself is really quite dangerous, because once it gets in your eyes, this material can really cut into your retina. So having watched this video, hopefully you've learnt a little bit about cleaning ceilings, the dangers involved not only to the operator but to you and your family. People have insulation removed for all sorts of reasons, and quite often the decision is dictated by price. It shouldn't be. It should be revolving around a decision based on the safety of you, the environment and your family. As you can see, there is a wrong way of doing things and there's a right way of doing things. There's also a whole lot more information we'd like to impart to you, but unfortunately time doesn't allow us to in the few minutes that we've allocated to this video. But if you do have more questions, specific questions, we'd really love to help you and help you make a wise decision. A little while ago we were called to the house of Caroline and Katrina in Lane Cove. They had a chronic odour problem. There was a smell that went right through the house and they couldn't work out what it was, and a friend of theirs said, should call ceiling suckers, they'll fix the problem. They had chronic rat problems, they had chronic possum problem. You can see this piece of plastic I'm lifting up here, that black is just possum urine. So to resolve the problem, I had to first of all lift all the plastic, roll it up, progressively work my way out to the opening that I'd made into the roof in the first place. There was offcuts of timbers, there was all sorts of building materials, and it was only then that I was able to actually get into the ceiling to suck the insulation out. It seems like a big job, but it took about 1 hour to progressively clear all the rubble, all the plastic sheeting, offcuts of timber, broken tiles out of the roof and onto the driveway below. And it was only then that the girls really appreciated what they had in the roof. Not only this plastic that itself stank, but also carcasses of dead rats, dead possums. After I removed most of the stuff, I was then able to vacuum the bats out of the roof, allowing free and ready access to the roof itself. And it was at this point that one of the girls decided she'd like to get in the roof to have a look.
Yeah.
Wow.
See, right alongside you, there's a dead rat there as well.
Oh, yuck, don't point those out.
But
Oh, yuck.
the guy, when he worked up here, he did bizarre things. So what do you think of all the stuff that come out?
Oh, disgraceful. Yeah. It's embarrassing.
You didn't think it was going to be. You didn't think it was going to be this much.
It was going to be that bad. No, not even. And we didn't. We were very shocked by the possum. Didn't expect to see a little friend up there. Like,
Right.
2 little friends.
Okay.
Oh, no, but there was a lot more, wasn't there, of these?
Yeah, there's about 8 or 9 that I'll pull apart to suck out, because you can't suck the rat's whole. So anyway, it's done. You're happy?
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, sorry it took so long, but
Sorry, it took you so long.
Very few people actually take the time to get up in the roof with me when I'm sucking a ceiling. But when they do, it's always gratifying to me to hear the comments that they make about what a difference to the roof, how safely the work was done, the fact that there was no mess, and the legacy would be for them a clean, hygienic ceiling. After vacuuming all the insulation out, one of the last things that I do is put rat baits out. I disinfect the ceiling, I put up odour barriers that repels rats, and this allows then for the next stage of work to commence, which is laying new insulation, creating a warmer house in wintertime, cooler house in summer.